What's up, Raw and Real Entrepreneurs, wherever you are in the world? I hope you're having an amazing day. And I am sure you have heard about DeepSeek and what this AI company is doing to disrupt everything from the US stock market to all of technology. It's quite incredible. And my guest and I are going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about the freeze on grants in the United States. That deeply affects female founders. In fact, a couple of my girlfriends who are founders in the women's health space, they have positioned their companies with grants and they actually don't know how to go raise traditional funding. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about getting scrappy, getting resourceful. And my guest today is a 5-time founder, and she knows exactly what she's talking about. Before we get into the show, if this show is helpful, please do subscribe. Please write a great review. Please share it on social. Tag me on social. This show is a labor of love. We're about 400 episodes in, and I truly hope and I know that this benefits you. If not, you wouldn't be here. So I would love that shout out. It'd be great. If you haven't checked out my new company, the Pause.ai, this is a health platform for women 40 plus. And if you're not a woman 40 plus, cool, share it with one. I would love that. We are just getting started. We are not an app. We are an experience, and we are onboarding our early subscribers to give us feedback. It's only $3.99 a month. I mean, gosh, you can't even get a Starbucks for that. So check it out, www.thepause.ai, and go to the Pause.ai site. I am speaking at some various places, and you are more than welcome to come and hang out with me. I would love to see you in person. My guest today on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship is a 5-time serial entrepreneur. She is a visionary innovator in media and technology. She was honored in 2024 as an AI Pioneer of the Year by the California Investment Forum. She also invests in women-funded businesses as a venture partner and entrepreneur in residence at the venture firm Zero Limits Capital. She is the CEO and founder of Podopolo. This is her newest venture. This is an AI and blockchain-powered podcast platform, which is revolutionizing the fast-growing but fragmented podcast and creator ecosystems. I can speak to that. And it is really helping podcasters grow their audience and their revenue, so fans easily discover new podcasts and communities and win rewards for engaging, and businesses are getting a bigger return, which is amazing. So we're going to be talking about that. And one of the things I want you to know is she started her career working with some of the leading media brands, including the BBC, the Times of London, ABC, CNBC, and the Financial Times. She created and grew a BBC television show to a $20 million audience, 20 million viewer audience, sorry. Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, told her she asked the best questions when she interviewed him as a 24-year-old correspondent for the Times of London. And she is so credentialed. Check out her bio in the show notes. But let's jump into the show. We could have done a longer show, but oh my gosh, there are so many things you're going to learn, from hiring to how to be scrappy and resourceful and raising capital and what mistakes to avoid to grow and scale your startup. So let's get started with my guest on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, the one and only Melinda Wittstock.
This is Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, the show that brings the no-nonsense truth of what is required to start, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Susan Sly.
Melinda, first and foremost, welcome to Raw and Real Entrepreneurship. It is fun. I had a great time on your show, and we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about DeepSeek. We saw the market drop. We saw suddenly this company that allegedly used only $6 million to train their models disrupt a whole sector. People were freaking out. The market's kind of recovered. But what is your take on DeepSeek and why was it so disruptive?
Well, first of all, I'm going to get to the irony of all of this, is because when you have a constraint, it makes you have to innovate and be better. And this is something that all women entrepreneurs know. And it's one of the reasons why we return 60 cents more on every dollar invested, is because of that phenomena, right? So when you have pools of money, like all the Silicon Valley guys are just like, throw money at it. there's no reason why they couldn't have come up with that innovation, is they didn't need to. And so the sort of artificial constraint of not being able to get your hands on all those pricey NVIDIA chips, right, suddenly means, oh my goodness, the entrepreneurial brain goes to work and, oh my gosh, you have to innovate. And so the other aspect of it, I think, that's interesting is the open source model, right? Because generally, I think society overall, and we have, it's like up and down a little bit, but as we sort of move to much more of an abundance focused energy, of course, we have a lot of pushback from the kind of scarcity people. There's an opportunity to innovate in such a way that actually increases the world's knowledge and doesn't kind of sector it off into different pockets here and there. So there's a difference between a kind of scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. So in the context of AI or any technology, what does that look like? It looks like open source. It looks like it's actually lifting people up and enabling innovation, not kind of proprietary scarcity, keeping it from people. And I think that's a really interesting shift. So I could go on about the irony of now OpenAI saying, oh, look, it looks like they maybe stole from our model. Another irony, because all the copyrighted information in the world was copied by OpenAI. So like, oh, come on, give it a break, right? And I think it's really interesting. I'm excited that it's open source also because it enables any company like yours or mine to just download that whole thing locally and start to use it. What's interesting about it is it explains its logic. So it reduces the need for prompt engineers. It reduces the cost. It levels or gets some way towards leveling the playing field. So folks like you and me that are innovating in AI actually can compete. And so for that, I'm actually rather grateful.
Yeah, there's so many thoughts I have, Melinda, going back to, I mean, you're an award-winning journalist, 5 stars, like seriously, like all of the experience you have. And one of the earliest concepts that my father instilled in me when I was 10 years old, he handed me the book Sun Tzu, The Art of War.
Oh,
right. Yeah. And one of the tenets is when your enemy is stronger, you go in and you figure out how to divide them or disrupt them. And I looked at this piece of technology and, you and I have been around several blocks, sister, over the course of our careers. And I look at this technology. It was like when Beyonce drops an album and no one, there's no forewarning and just poof. And then suddenly it goes number 1. It was the same thing. It's like drop this piece of technology, this open source code, and just let it disrupt. And when we look at Elon Musk and his data center in Memphis, 100,000 H100s, a PO for another 100,000 H100s, and these guys use a few H800s, and they, build this out. And to your point, I had a friend who is running it locally, and my nerdy party trick is I know the whole NVIDIA GPU catalog. So I said, he was like, yeah, at my colo, we're running it locally and, we're playing with it. And he's like, Susan, this is so amazing. Or he calls me Sly, this is so amazing. And I said, so what's your config? And he's using 2 gaming GPUs. He's like, you don't even need to use these high powered, super expensive GPUs. And to your point, to the people who use this or other such pieces of code like it will allow them to compete. We don't need to see AI companies spending tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars on R&D anymore. And I wake up every morning, Melinda, like, oh my gosh, it's a sprint again. It's a sprint, right? And you said something really interesting about how as women, we deliver 60 cents on the invested dollar over our male counterparts because we're more resourceful, more scrappy. And yet we had an announcement that essentially said there's a freeze on federal funding. A bunch of my girlfriends who with their startups, they've never raised capital and they don't know how. If I was going to write a book, I'd write a book called Raise Money Like a Girl. They kicked off their companies with grants. And so now they're texting me going, I don't know how to raise money. What's going on? I was going for my phase 2 or phase 3 grant and suddenly there's no grants. What's your take on that?
Oh, it's heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. It's so, I've tried to varying degrees of success to raise money for 5 startups now. It's really hard. And women get less than 2% of the venture money, as we all know, and that number hasn't changed in almost 30 years.
It went down actually from
Yeah.
2.5 to 2.3. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. And then we've also been through a really tough funding environment on top of all of that because of high interest rates. So Silicon Valley just kind of closed. So it's very, very difficult, and you have to be really scrappy on the funding. And now at a time when AI, which is, okay, it just got cheaper, okay, but it's still not, like, you still need money, you still need investment. And I think the government is very short-sighted in this policy because it puts a complete kibosh on any innovation. Obviously, they've taken a stance against diversity, equity, inclusion, i.e. women. One of the things that I find also very worrying about all of that is the attacks on private companies by the government for DEI policies, like state attorneys general on the Republican side coming after Costco, suing Costco. Since when, in a free enterprise capitalist system, does the government do that to private enterprise? Like, that's communism, like that's fascism, but that's not what the system that we're supposed to be living in. And I think people have an attitude mostly like, oh, this could never happen here. Can't quite imagine it, but it is happening, and it's happening very, very quickly. So you asked me what the answer is to this. I think ultimately women have to work together. We have to finally get out of that scarcity mode I was talking about before and literally support each other from a place of abundance, because that's really the only way. I think we have to remake a lot of these institutions kind of from the ground up. We can't just be kind of bitchy competitors with each other. We have to really focus on, because when one woman really succeeds, like we all do, and if we can come to it with that attitude, it's better. And this is one of the reasons I became a venture partner in a new fund that's actually funding seed stage female entrepreneurs primarily and diverse teams who are innovating in, emerging technologies and really at the application of those. Because I think when it comes to AI, the real money is going to be made by how people apply it, right?
Yes.
What it actually means. Does it solve someone's problem? Does it make them money? Does it save them money? Does it improve their life? Yes, no. Okay. Otherwise, it's AI for AI's sake, right? So the application is going to be so that's where we're really focused, as a team. And I think if I'm very excited about this at Zero Limits Capital. I'm the entrepreneur in residence and venture partner in addition to building my own company. And you see such amazing innovation from women and really wanting to put money because whoever's putting money into these companies is deciding the future economy, in fact. Okay. So then, but there's a little part of me that worries, oh my God, are all the state attorneys general going to come after us because we're funding women? Like, what then? Like, can we afford all that? We want the capital to go towards women, not lawyers. Yeah. So it's a really chilling time in that sense. We'll get through it, but we have to figure out pretty innovative ways, like with our kind of entrepreneurial thinking caps, how we get around that. I'll be polite and say reaction to the rise of women, to the rise of diversity, to, like, it's really fear-based, I sense, just sort of energetically, all these men who are very fragile in ego and can't handle anyone else succeeding. I don't know how else to see it.
Well, and it's the definition, in my opinion, it's the definition of DEI, because I think the issue is, as women, we don't see DEI with the same definition as perhaps some people do. So that definition to say, well, you're hiring based on someone's gender or based on someone's sexual preference or based on someone's color of their skin, that's not what we're saying.
Yeah, it's not a quota. People confuse it with affirmative action, right? Yeah. DEI is not quota. It's not I'm hiring you because you're a woman or I'm funding you because you're a woman. It is clearing up. It's actually to do with meritocracy. It's actually leveling a playing field so merit can be recognized. That's it. That's all it is. And beyond that, it's making sure that we live in a diverse society. We have diverse customers. Our team should be representative of the people that we sell products and services to. Like, duh.
Well, and it's like 2 years ago, the New York Times came out with, I think, the list of, I can't remember if it's the top 25 people in AI in the United States. There wasn't one woman on it. Like Lisa Su from AMD wasn't on it. Like, and I'm going, really?
Yeah,
Really?
there's so many. There's a lot of women doing amazing things in AI, and we're kind of like, that movie Hidden Figures, right?
Yeah.
We're like that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's AI is, in my opinion, is very feminine, right? Because when we look at generative AI, it is producing an output like you and I talked about on your show, which is an amazing show. Right? That I'm not just saying that because I was on it, just because I'm a fangirl of it, but that it is producing something. Women naturally give birth, and that's what generative AI is. It's input, and then it's giving birth to an output, whether it's Sora or whether it's, whatever AI platform it is. When we look at it, I want to get granular based on, again, 5 startups. You're the person that Steve Jobs was quoted as saying, like, you ask the best questions of everyone. As I said, this is not your first time around this block. We've had a recession, we've had a pandemic. We look at female-led startups that came out of those periods of time. Canva is one we all quote and talk about. Even if we look at Bumble, oh my gosh, right? Like, Whitney Wolf Herd. So what advice would you give to female founders right now? I know I was in a meeting preparing for grant applications Monday night, and then Tuesday it was like, okay, there are no grants, right? So what advice would you give to female founders who are at this like pre-seed or seed stage in this current environment?
Okay, so a couple things. You've got two sides of a coin. On one hand, you really have to know your value deep inside you, right? You're producing something of immense value that will be valuable to many, many other people, assuming your innovation is one that improves people's lives, right? It's creating value for those people. So how much value? If you succeed, how many millions, even billions of dollars will you put into the economy? Either by saving people money or making people money at the end of the day, right? Because all these different products and innovations. So understand that's you, that's your innovation. That wouldn't exist but for you. Know your value. An investor's not doing you a favor. You're letting them into an opportunity for which you have done all the hard work. You have taken all the risk, right? So know your value. And I think it's tricky for women because I think we have this kind of subconscious imposter syndrome. We're striving so hard to prove ourselves and our competency and be perfect and all the things and look good doing it and balance a drinks tray and high heels as we do all this stuff, right? You got to let some of that stuff drop. Like, you forget about being perfect. Perfectionism is the enemy of all of us, right? Really, like, just be real. So know your value, be real. And then I think just in the environment that we're in right now, being super scrappy, like, not like really focusing your efforts on a couple areas. One, doing the things that only you can do, like really like where your unique genius is at play. And that means knowing what that is. Like, a lot of people take years to actually know like what actually differentiates them as a human being and as an entrepreneur. So knowing that, getting really smart about who you work with. Like, because you can't afford to waste money on a bad hire. You can't, right? I would say stick with contractors for a while, or even overseas workers, because as much as I love the idea of creating American jobs, the laws are such, and I've been burned by this, laws are such that if you miss a payroll, in some states, that's a felony. Okay, so it's much harder to do a startup now. So just keep your burn super, super low. And then last but not least, co-create with your customers, build a community from day one. I wish I'd understood this much earlier in my entrepreneurial career, where your customers, your potential future customers are sort of already included in a way in the innovation, and they're giving you feedback and they feel invested in it. So by the time and they'll help you. And by the time that you launch, you have real traction, and every investor wants to invest in traction. They don't want to invest in ideas. They don't want to invest in kind of just sort of a potential, well, it could be good, but we don't really know. They need some proof that actually people are willing to pay you for what you've done, right? So just, again, focus from that at the earliest possible, just getting to revenue as quickly as you can, getting to profitable revenue as quickly as you can. Like, no woman has ever been funded for the Jeff Bezos, or Mark Zuckerberg growth for growth's sake, and we'll figure out the monetization later. I don't know any woman who's ever been funded for that. Only men get that kind of money. So We have to just be a lot more savvy and find other women and mentors who really have your, like, genuinely have your back, not just you go girl, but like really actually care, right? And are going to help you. And oh yes, a long list. Sorry. Be forever curious, be open to learning, just always be learning. Yeah. I mean, there's probably more, but those would be my top.
I just wrote half a page of notes, sister. And I love that you said that, because I've taken some flack, with the pause. But one of the things we did is we opened the community, Melinda, before we had the product. Mm-hmm. So in my, one of the things I did, I built a massive community that for one company in the B2C space generated $2 billion in sales for that company. It was a domestic company. So my zone of genius is community building. That's what I know how to do. So we opened the Facebook community. We're doing everything from quote cards, recipes, fun challenges, even if you don't have the app. Then what we did is we invited early beta testers to come in, but we didn't give it away for free. Why? I have a friend / colleague. He spent $4 million developing a free app that no one used, but people keep throwing freaking money at him. I am bootstrapping a big part of this company. So no, it's not free. It's $3.99 a month, but it didn't cost me nothing to create. And then we're taking all of that feedback, even from the people who haven't subscribed yet. We're doing polls. What is it you want? What are the next features? I don't have an ego around it. Wayne Dyer was like, ego stands for edge and got up. Don't have an ego around it. And we don't operate in traditional agile dev cycles. It's like when the feature is ready, we push, we get feedback, we push. And so, I'm not afraid to be building in flight because I'm so clear where we're going. We didn't start just to be an app. We have a big roadmap ahead. But I love that you said that, because it's validation for what we're doing. Right. And we turned investors away. I had one guy. He's like, I don't get the problem statement. And I'm like, this isn't for you. This isn't for you. Like, menopause is not a problem statement. Like, it isn't for you. Well, I don't care what size check you write.
Point, maybe if he cares about his wife when she's going through all this, it is. But yeah, men do have that. So many stories of women who have products that are specifically aimed at women, and they don't understand the market. I mean, okay, so dude, like, you want to not make money? Okay, have at it. Just keep investing in, it's just so crazy. I don't understand it.
And it's not all men. I mean, we have, amazing, HP is one of our supporters. Sally Frank at Microsoft, we're in her ecosystem. She's the global head of healthcare startups for Microsoft. She's amazing. And then Samsung, Ken Honeycutt, who is our IoT advisor. So we have a lot of amazing humans. Right. And that's the thing, is that this concept, and you said, is this like looking to be curious. I want to ask you this question. If you could, knowing what you know now, right? We always want to be in that, windshield, not the rear view mirror, but knowing what you know now, 5 startups in, what advice would you give to yourself? Like, in startup one, because we have listeners all over the world, and everyone from, I'm thinking of doing Etsy and 12-year-old founders to billionaires who listen to the show. But if you could go back in time, Melinda, like, what is that thing you'd say to yourself?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of things I accidentally did right because I had no idea what I was doing in startup number 1, right? Like, so like, I mean, to be honest, it was
that's like a t-shirt. I accidentally did something right. Like that. I'll buy that.
2002, right? It was after 9/11, and my first startup was a political news agency out of Capitol Hill, which is actually still incredibly innovative. So we were the first news organization in the world to use MP3 audio, right? And FTP and like all these different things, and a lot of technology, which allowed us to really localize at scale all this incredible news content to 300 radio stations, TV stations, increasingly digital properties and such. And it evolved into like quite a large technology business. But back then, I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. Like I sort of knew that like I had this idea and I was just going to start and go for it. And I like literally didn't know anything. And I think at the time I would have really benefited from taking, I don't know, like having, like being part of a mastermind or like having a mentor or having a coach, but like, I just didn't do any of that. I was just like out on my own, just like hacking it. Like, and I look back and I also have like my daughter, she was born 6 weeks after we launched. So like I had this 6-week-old and I'm busy. It was insane, man. But we grew like incredibly quickly. I think I just learned a lot of things. Most of the things that I learned really in that first one was that there's a lot of things you can't control. Like stuff just happens that you can't possibly anticipate. So you can spend a lot of time planning and making the perfect plan. And basically your plan, it's sort of a guide, but it's kind of BS because it's going to go differently. Like I like sailing as a metaphor, right? If you've ever been on a sailboat, you know that the winds change and the currents change. So it's impossible to sail in a straight line. You literally have to zigzag. So you're heading towards your destination and you'll get to your destination, but the pathway is going to be different than what you anticipate. So it's how you factor in what's your plan when things go wrong or something happens, or like say, for instance, the government suddenly takes away, freezes grants. Like, where did that come? What? Okay, so that wasn't in anyone's plan. And so what do you do with those sorts of, and so that's just sort of endemic to entrepreneurship, that stuff is going to happen. And so who are you going to be in that moment? What kind of support systems do you have? I didn't have any support systems around myself. Like, do you know what I mean? I just, 2 years in, I was like completely burnt out and such. But like, I learned it was kind of the school of hard knocks kind of MBA, because I never went to business school. Actually, funnily enough, I never went to journalism school either.
Right.
I wasn't a journalist. So I just, maybe I'm just I like experiential learning or something. I don't know. But yeah, there were a lot of lessons in that. Like I had an employee that stole from me, right? I had all kinds of things go wrong. And you just sort of recover. And with each one of those things that you sort of recover from and you learn from, it actually gives you real confidence that you know that, okay, you know that the proverbial is going to hit the fan at some point or another, and you don't really know. But what you do know is that you're up to it, right?
Yeah. And it gets easier. I mean, you've done 5. This is my second AI startup. And I was asked on a show, someone was like, what did you learn that you brought into this one? And, there's a checklist. There's a checklist of great stuff and there's a checklist of crappy stuff. Like you believe in someone, but they don't end up being the right hire, or you use an external contractor team and it's like, what the heck am I doing? And, but
I've made those. I've made the worst or bad hires.
Yes.
And that I have done in every single company. Like I'll just be, right. And sometimes you just don't know because one of the things that I found about myself, right? Because entrepreneur, like if you want therapy, just become an entrepreneur. It's going to teach you. It's going to teach you about yourself, right? Okay. So I'm a very open, generous person. I really want people to succeed. I'm probably like, right. So, and we all have confirmation bias. So when somebody comes for a job with you and they kind of sense that about you and they kind of use that or explain it, that's happened to me. So it's toughened me up like a lot. I still want to be that, like how to sort of not lose myself and my character and who I am, right? Because that's one of the things that makes me, I think, a good person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, just not being taken for right. And so it's costly when you bring someone in, especially at a senior level, and they end up being just completely the wrong fit, or they're like actively undermining you. I had a guy that was going behind my back to my investors. My investors were great. They shut this guy down. He kicked his, kicked him out. But like, it was just a horrible betrayal. Yeah. And so you have these things. And at the end of the day, business is about people. And it's about relationship. And that's the most costly mistake that you can make, I think. So
absolutely. And giving away a lot of equity in the company, right? Like my husband right. We could have a cocktail over this conversation. My husband always says, my greatest strength is I believe in people. My greatest weakness is I believe in people.
Okay. Said so much better than I just said it, but that's exactly right. Summed it up perfectly. Yeah.
And when it works, I mean, I have some of my team members from my former company, And the things I always believed in them, and I worked with them for years, who are working with me now at the pause on the engineering side, they're just rising to the occasion. It's the fishbowl, right? They were a goldfish in a small bowl. Now I'm like, you're in an early stage startup, you have a big fishbowl, right? So you get to work on a lot of cool stuff, and you get to ideate and create and have that vision. And when it doesn't work, it can be like, oh my gosh, I need a glass of Pinot Noir because like, what the heck, here I go again. Like Britney Spears song, oops, I did it again. How has this changed? And I'm so curious about this, Melinda, how has this changed your hiring process? Because obviously you become more discerning. It still happens. My friend Rebecca Zung, who's a global expert on narcissists, she was like on the show and she's like, I just had another one slip by me. Yeah, she's my sister, actually, like not real sister, but yeah, one of my best girlfriends. So how does it change your hiring process? They're going to slip by, but it doesn't mean we can't tighten it up.
Yeah, it's kind of trust but verify, and so you can set up ways in which, like, we're about, for Podopolo, we're about to close a funding round. God knows, touching wood any day, like it's soon, right?
Sending good vibes, sister.
Yeah. So just like, because it's been delayed like a long time, which has been painful, right? Honestly, because as an entrepreneur, you want to run, go. We've just been feels like we've been sort of artificially held back more than I would like. So got everything kind of ready to go. We have a lot of hiring to do. I have kind of decided that I want people to really earn my trust rather than give them my trust ahead of the time. Like I will be very, very clear in terms of what are we trying to accomplish here. I'm not a micromanager. I hate that. I don't enjoy it. I don't want to be that. I don't want to tell people how to do what they do, but I do want to reward results. So how people get there, that's great. If they want to work at 4 a.m, I don't care, like literally, but really aligning people to the values of the company and testing those values and testing character is more important to me than skill at this point, right? More and more important. So getting really, really good at that. And then architecting deals, like we're going to work with a lot of people as contractors to begin with and like earn those positions. We're not going to just give, and we never do, just give equity away. Equity is earned. You hit this milestone? Yeah, okay. You've unlocked X%. You hit this milestone? Okay, great, right? So just being a bit more hard ass about it, I think,
Yeah. I've followed the same thing in the pause. So everyone starts as a contractor and I'm like, I'm not paying myself. And I know how many hours a week I'm working. So, like in French, there's a saying, chacun son goût, to each his own. So everyone starts as a contractor. They get a trial period. And the other thing we've done, I have a funny story about this. So in a past company where I had created a hiring process that certain people chose not to follow, they ended up hiring someone, Melinda, who wasn't a real person because they skipped part of the hiring process, right? So someone came to the interview pretending to be a person. They hired that person, started paying him, and wasn't the real person. So one of the things we did is we have a technical interview. Then we have a non-technical interview. So our team members who are not engineers do a cultural interview. Then we have a paid testing period if a person vets it. Like after we do the references and we tell them we're going to do a background check and all that stuff. And then we have a test and you're paid, but it's not just some test. You have to build a piece of something for us. If you're on the tech team, you don't get to touch code. And then we go from small contract.
Yeah. All of it, because so much of it's sort of the attitude though of the people, because you can have, and I've had this in my companies where you have a star performer, but does not aligned on values. And then it demoralizes everybody else. So how is the team actually working together? So this is why we're so big. Like we have a big code of ethics and like our values and getting alignment on values is really critical. So just the questions you ask. So say Podopolo's values, not in any particular order, but the top two are both innovation and abundance. And so what do those mean in practice? So say innovation means that you need to be allowed to fail. You need to be allowed to have a safe space to be able to say like outside the box ideas and feel safe in that and almost rewarded for it. But if I'm going to afford you that ability to have that ability to fail, you've got to learn from your failure, and you've got to pass that failure on transparently to everybody else so that knowledge is shared so we never make that mistake again, right? So in other words, when you take a value like that, how do you actually operationalize that value in your company? And I think a lot of businesses don't take time to really think about that. So like say abundance. So that sounds airy fairy woo woo, like, oh yay, kumbaya and all that stuff. But it actually means something. It means as a company, we're really dedicated to uplifting the entire podcast ecosystem so everybody wins. So like when we architect deals, like we have kind of very cooperative sort of landscape where we can be competing in one area with, say, Apple, but selling them some, right? At the same time, Spotify or an ad network or whatever, right? But it also means, so like just in terms of the deal structure, but it also means in terms of the company, we do things like actually memorialize somebody on the company lifting somebody else up on the company. Somebody else, like we did a thing for years called You've Done Good, right? Where at the end of the week, like you literally had to call somebody out on the team that you saw do something good that really helped somebody else, right? So again, it's just like I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but it was a way to just operationalize that. Yeah. And then like integrity, what does integrity mean? Integrity means not just truth or honesty. It's if you say you're going to do something, you do it. Okay. Now, if you can't do it, then that's a whole other thing. You've got to let people know that you're not going to be able to do it. So what it actually means for us, if you commit to something, like say in a code or like a marketing or something like that, and all of a sudden you figure out, oh man, I don't have the time to do this, or I don't have the resources I need or whatever. So in other words, before you commit to, yes, I can get this done by Friday, know that you have the resources to do it, know that you have the team members to do it, and if you don't, be clear about what it will actually take so you can remain in integrity. Yeah. So those are sort of 3 examples of how to operationalize values. So when we look at our hiring process, we test for a lot of those things, but then the other thing is the onboarding. The onboarding is really complicated, made loads of mistakes there, not because we don't know how to do it. It's because you get super busy. And founders often think, oh, everybody knows this, or they can read my mind, or they can't, right? And so your role as your company grows and you're hiring more people is, as a CEO, your job is just a completely different job than it was in the earlier stages of your company. And so like, you've got to be different. You got to let go of stuff. And that can be hard because we gravitate to things that are comfortable, that we're familiar with, but like you end up, like almost, at least more than a third of your time ends up being about your team, sometimes like a half of your time. And that's very, very different from the early stages. So having that flexibility to do that, or just getting help from somebody else who's really like getting a chief of staff or somebody, right, that you can really trust,
Yes, absolutely. That I cannot emphasize that one enough. And to your point about the values, and I think abundance is a great example, because if at the pause, we only have 2 core values, trust and wow, right? If you don't communicate well, I can't trust you. If you need help and you don't ask, I can't trust you, right? The list goes on and on, right? So I spent a lot of time thinking, like, if I could boil this down to 2 things, that's it. Like, going back to Zappos days, delivering happiness, right? Tony Hsieh. And what he did was so disruptive. And, it's too bad that he died so young, and what he was doing. I wonder what the company would have become had he not sold it to Amazon. There's so many things, but, we'll never know.
I know. I just feel, he was very, very brilliant. I had oh God, it was wonderful. For a while, I used to consult for his downtown project in Las Vegas. Yeah. Where he'd sold Zappos. But it's so innovative. There's so many things from that book, Delivering Happiness. So like, it's one of those textbooks. Everybody should read that and apply a lot of his thinking to the way you interact with your customers. I mean, it's genius.
And your team, and to your point, it's so funny because we do the exact same thing. So Fridays, it's like you're giving shout outs. You're giving shout outs, and I will actually call you out if you didn't give a shout out, because if we're going to deliver trust and wow, it starts internally. So how are we delivering wow to each other? right?
Mm-hmm.
And how is their trust if you're going behind someone's back and saying, well, so-and-so snapped at me, and I mean, you know, like whatever, that it doesn't matter how skilled someone is. One toxic person with a high amount of skill is a cancer in an organization that will destroy a company. And,
Right.
you know, and
That's all it
yeah,
takes.
all it takes is that one person. And
Fire
we can,
fast. That's my other advice. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but like literally, like as soon as you know, or your spidey sense, because you can talk yourself like out of making a decision that you need to make because it's a hard decision because our mind is gonna like, and also we're nice, right? And so no, you've got to fire fast.
yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I don't even consider myself nice, but I do say don't mistake my kindness for weakness. And the second thing I say is don't confuse my resume with my experience.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I
I
don't
love
need
it.
to be like, since it's raw and real entrepreneurship, and I was raised by a single dad, everyone knows this, but I don't need to be effing mansplained about a lot of things. My previous company, we had 100 employees all over the world. I have been there, done that, dealt with IP issues. I mean, so many things, all of that stuff. And so I don't, you know, what I need is people who get the vision, support the vision, understand the landscape, and understand, like, you know, even as an angel investor for my 7 startups in my portfolio right now, I've shifted how I invest, right? Because I look for founders who've been athletes or martial artists, because can you get back up if someone kicked you in the face? Can you push through the pain of whatever? Because I was both of those things, right? I was a professional athlete and I did martial arts when I was in law enforcement. So if you kick me in the face, I'm going to get down. And if you kick me again, I'm going to get up again. And, you know, all of those things. So I
Okay,
changed my ethos.
does figure skating count? Because I used to just fall
Heck
on hard
yes.
every day from age 4 to 15 when I wrecked my knee and I couldn't continue. But I was like national level competition, like about a
Well,
year
and
from applying for the Olympics.
that's why
And
you've done 5 startups. I mean, that's no joke. I skated like very recreationally. My aunt was in the ice capades though, so shouts out to Aunt Gloria. But until I was 15. But you know, any sport, anyone who's done a sport for long periods of time, they know what it's like. Okay, you had to tape your ankle to go out on the ice, or you had to do the double axel and perform it, and you only learned it 2 weeks ago. Like all of those things translate to
all of those
startups.
things I learned actually from skating. I learned visualization. Yeah, as a
Yes.
10-year-old, I remember I was working on my first triple jump, right? For this skate
Mhm.
and people who watch skating. It was a triple Saukow. Okay. So I was working
Mhm.
on that and I kept falling and falling and falling. And one night in my dreams, I saw myself and felt myself do it. I had this really weird muscle memory from my dream. The very next day, I went on the ice, didn't even warm up, just went out and landed the thing, right? And then I
Yeah.
realized, that's interesting. So, what you can actually see, what you can actually visualize, but actually feel, like, because it was the emotion of the feeling of it, wow, like you can actually do. So, that was a really interesting lesson. And sometimes I forget that, right? Just the power of sometimes the stillness. I suppose this is a martial arts thing too, of the stillness and the concepts of that. Of like, I love Bruce Lee's book, Be Like Water,
Yeah.
where you can kind of quiet your mind and just really visualize and feel where it is that you're going or what you want, right? I would add that to my earlier advice about what's important, for being an entrepreneur, for sure. Sorry, need more coffee for my voice.
Yeah, no, you're good. And we're coming to the top of the show. I think, you know, I look at my final question for you. I look at the startups you've done and look at Podopolo, which is it is a complex tech stack from
Very
my
complicated.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know,
Actually, it is and it isn't. I mean, it's AI. It's a set of AI that we have our own really interesting large language model in effect, which is all known podcasts from the beginning of time. Okay, so you think 6 million or so in all languages, hundreds of millions of episodes. The AI is going through all of that, not only analyzing it to actually understand what's going on topically, but correlating that with what we know about, who's listening. And then there's a whole series of use cases around that, whether it's like wildly improved search and discovery, recommendation engine, generative AI. So podcasters get all the content that they need, like their transcripts, their captions, automatic clip creation, social posts, blah, 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 right? And also, but it allows advertisers to actually understand what is the best episode, where's the best placement on an episode for an ad that's actually going to convert and actually allow brand safety while also being relevant to an audience. So again, it's one thing, and it's a customizable API that our stack is driven by that API, but it's the same API that we would, license to an ad network, hosting company, et cetera, right? So it's kind of complicated, but it's kind of not. It's like one thing that does a lot of things.
Yeah. And when I say that, it's like from my mind, technology, because I believe that you've got blockchain in there as well. Like and I'm laughing with you, sister, because anyone who's not in this world would be like, they're already like going, that sounds really complex. And it is
brains.
Right. It's elegant complexity. And my final question for you is circling back to AI. So with Podopolo, how are you preventing AI bias? Because when most of the podcasts out there are produced by men, the top listening shows that make the most money, Joe Rogan, like all of them are all men. So how do you take the bias out of it?
Okay, so that's our algorithm. And this goes back to an old startup of mine back in 2011. I was using natural language processing, unsupervised machine learning, probabilistic modeling, semantics, and whatnot to assess and score the relevance and reliability, trustworthiness of user-generated content. Our own 2011, really pretty advanced stuff. Okay, so a lot of that IP I brought into Podopolo and this will start to become more obvious within the platform and within the recommendation engine over time, because I think we're dealing with a really serious disinformation problem. I have a long background in this, and I think my background as a journalist has really influenced my approach to technology, whether it's like AI or just, how that has been applied going way, way back to 2010, I think, when I first started really playing around with it in a serious way. So a long time. And so and this gets really complicated because we have like 20 or so different factors, actually 22 different factors of what we're looking at in a recommendation engine, because we don't want to just push people further and further and further and further into like Earth 1 or Earth 2, right? We want people to have a free exchange of information, right? But we're assessing for a lot of qualitative metrics as well as kind of relevance and a whole bunch of stuff. And that's just getting more sophisticated over time. It's a really hard issue though, because you run up against, you want to personalize an experience from the consumer facing side of Podopolo. So you want to allow for a personalized experience to be more convenient and relevant and time saving for people. But at the same time, you can artificially prevent them from getting information that's actually they need to hear. They may not want to hear, but they actually need to hear. And so how do you do that up against like free speech as opposed to, and these are the big debates of our time. It's a big issue. I like to think that we get it right. And I think the critical thing is transparency. And the critical thing at the end of the day is empowering and informing the end user so they have power over what they're doing. This is one of the reasons I like things like Blue Sky and AT Protocol, which we're going to use some of that AT protocol on the social aspects of our consumer app, because you really need to be empowered to create your own experience. But at the same time, you need to be free to discover what you really, really want to discover. So on Podopolo, even now, when you sign up and you say, okay, I really want stuff about women's health. Well, we're going to give you stuff about women's health. You said you wanted it, right? And whereas any other app is just going to, I don't know, I think a lot of the Spotify sort of has a recommendation engine. It's not that good. It's very underwhelming. Apple doesn't really. And so there's a lot of space for innovation there.
There's no question. And when you look at a behemoth like Apple, right, they're doing a lot of things. Spotify is still,
I mean, they're a hardware company. They're trying to be an AI company, but at the end of the day, do they really care about podcasts? Podcasts is just sort of like a lead generation. It's just sort of it's like a marketing thing for them. Actually, it's not their core business.
or even what they have done with ads. This is a whole other, hey, full disclosure, I've invested in Apple stock, right? But that's a whole other topic of conversation. I'm not going to pull on that thread because we could go there. Melinda, I cannot thank you enough for being here. What a fun conversation. And seriously, like, the time has flown by. And I'm excited to watch what you create, and thank you for your transparency, your just direct, raw and realness, and everything you're doing in the world, sister. Keep crushing it.
Oh God, well, you too. I mean, I can hardly wait. I'm being like, I'm the perfect candidate for your app. I'm right there with you. So I think it's really excellent. Like, it's so cool what you're doing, and it's so wonderful to meet other women who are daring to do hard things, right? Yeah. Because it's not easy, our paths, right? But like, let's have some fun along the way as we do the hard things, right? And more fun together. So thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And to all of our listeners, everywhere you are, don't forget, go and check out Melinda's new company, Podopolo, especially if you listen to podcasts, which obviously do. We would love a 5-star review because leaders ask for what they want. So thank you for all of our 5-star reviews globally. Share the show with a friend. And if there's anything to unpack because you don't understand some of the stuff we were talking about from the technology side, don't hesitate to reach out. I actually respond to all your comments. So with that, God bless, go rock your day, and I will see you in the next episode.